Thank you, good afternoon. I don't know who's got the tougher gig, me to try to keep you stimulated or for you to keep awake, but anyway, we'll get through the next 10 or 15 minutes and see how we go. Anyway, so I'm a 2013 Nuffield Scholar, like the other three gentlemen here this afternoon. And yeah, so we farm at Shepparton, so it's a winter-based cropping program in a Mediterranean environment with wheat, canola and fava beans, as Ryan alluded to. We've changed from a mixed operation 6 or 7 years ago when we had irrigation, when we had seed production and hay production as well, but we lost our water when the government shut down Lake McCartney, so we've had to simplify it back to a cropping system. So the topics that I wanted to cover for my Nuffield Scholarship, and it was fairly broad-ranging, but I sort of saw it as an incumbency project that I needed to look at all these topics because we wanted to look at changing our system. So looking at rotations and cover crops, what role they play in influencing nutrient availability, and just having a look at what other fertiliser application techniques there might be available to us from around the world. So first of all, I'd just like to thank some people. Obviously, thank you to Nuffield for the support they've given me in this opportunity from the scholarship. A great support I've had from the William Buckland Foundation for my scholarship. To all my hosts and their families around the world for the time that they gave to us and the hospitality they showed as we travelled, and to who I like to call the pit crew at home. So to Tracy, my wife, who yes, I did take her on a 3-week tour of Europe as our honeymoon/Nuffield Scholarship trip. To my parents, Neville and Wendy, and to my worker Steph, who they kept their wheels turning at home while I was away. So, I guess, how did I get to looking at what I looked at in my studies? Well, it probably goes back actually to a trip that I took to South Dakota as part of the Bill Crabtree tour in 2004. And one of the stops we made was to Dwayne Beck at the Dakota Lakes Research Station there. And one of the things that caught my attention was where they were doing dryland cropping trials with millet and sunflower in particular. They were getting better crop yields in their wheat the following year than they were on a stubble fallow, which I guess went against everything that we were thinking we were doing right at home in terms of our stubble fallow system of spraying weeds all summer. So a few years later, having come home from that trip, we developed we changed our system from a tine system of burning our stubbles and introduced a full stubble retention system with a controlled traffic system and a dedicated no-till seeder. And when we did this, I saw there was opportunities for us to expand our seeding operations from just in our traditional April and May period to effectively 12 months a year. So I describe it as my Queensland moment, that I had to start thinking like a Queenslander, that whenever we had moisture, we'd actually have the seeder ready to go out and start seeding. Because traditionally we've only sown in 2 months a year, and for most people to actually try and establish crops at any other time of the year, they'd pretty well see it as ludicrous. So in 2009, the first year we actually had the seeder, we were faced with a paddock that we didn't get sown of chickpeas in late May because of a thunderstorm. So we joined up with the University of Melbourne that year and the National Water Commission, and we established a summer cropping trial just to look at what we could do with opportunistic summer cropping. And that's a paddock of sunflowers that we grew that year at home. So we actually proved that we could do it. We harvested all the crops that we sowed, and we got them through to completion. But I guess in looking at a major change in our cropping system like this, it introduces what they call the precautionary principle. Actually, Mark Swift spoke about this in his Nuffield presentation last year in Perth. And all the precautionary principle essentially is that any action that's undertaken should not be taken if those consequences are uncertain and potentially dangerous. Well, I guess we figured there was going to be some uncertainty there, but we'd never know until we tried. So when I undertook my travels, my personal travels, there were sort of two areas of interest that I wanted to look at, given my topics. And the first one was in soil carbon, because at the end of the day, the soil organic carbon level pretty well drives all the biological, physical and chemical processes that occur in the soil. So what I wanted to look at is, how do cover crops and rotations influence soil organic carbon levels, what influence that has on nutrient availability and uptake efficiency, what effect it is on plant available water, and I guess ultimately what if the implications are going to be for soil and plant health. And the second thing I actually wanted to have a look at was psychology. And it probably wouldn't be the second thing on most people's list, but given that we were looking at undertaking a major change in our cropping system, we really have to get a good understanding of how and why we make decisions. And I'm sure when we established that summer cropping trial, a lot of the neighbours and probably people in the area were probably looking at it and say, well, why would you do that? We know it's not going to work. I guess my response to people whenever they said that was, well, why not? We don't know. We won't know until we try. So, but I think the one thing you have to keep in mind that, and everyone here in the room who's been a Nuffield Scholar has been through this, we come back from our travels, we're full of ideas, we're full of energy, we're full of enthusiasm, and we just think we can change the world. I saw this sign recently when we were in South Dakota, and I thought that just put everything back into perspective. So I'm just wondering if that should be the new motto for Nuffield. So what did I learn when I was away? Well, the first thing I learned that is no matter what you do, progress can be progressive. You don't have to do everything at once. Take small steps, see how they go, analyse them, and if you're ready to take the next step, take the next step. So in terms of some of the people and the things that we saw on our trip, this is Rick Bieber, no relation, but he farms in South Dakota, not far from where Dwayne's research station is. And one of the things that a lot of these guys that we visited, they are actually finding that they're building their soil organic carbon levels over a number of years. The interesting thing is they're finding that they're not just doing it through one change. It's a management change over time to the whole system. So it seems to be that they start with a no-till, and then they look at their crop diversity and their rotation mix, and they introduce their cover crops. And through the combination of that change in the system, they're actually starting to build organic carbon levels. One of the interesting things that actually Rick wanted to do that morning, we had 3 inches of rain that morning before we arrived. The ground was saturated. He actually challenged the bus driver to drive his bus, 50-seater bus, over that corn paddock. And the only reason he actually didn't let him do it at the end is it was only a single drive bus. He didn't want him to lose traction and get stuck. But that's how stable they see their soils now in the last probably 15, 20 years since they've changed their system. So, but the interesting thing that a number of these guys quoted in their production system is that the industry standard for corn production in the US across the industry is 1 pound of nitrogen is required for production of 1 bushel of corn. And it was quite common that these guys are now quoting that their demand for nitrogen, for applied nitrogen, has come down to about 0.6 to 0.7 pound of nitrogen per bushel of corn. So obviously the remainder of the nitrogen is being driven out of the mineralisation of the organic carbon that's happening in the soil. So another thing that I discovered, or we had a look at when we were over there, was companion planting, which is essentially just planting either 1, 2 or 3 more than one species in a paddock at the same time. And this is Cronin Farms in South Dakota that we visited this year. And that those 2 photos there are taken in exactly the same paddock, not far from the same spot. And the photo on the left is the corn that was just grown as a monoculture. And you've got to remember that 2012 was an extreme drought for most of the corn belt of the US. So they were in a very water deficit position this time. That photo was taken in July. And the photo on the right-hand side is in the same paddock, and that's forage soybeans that have been interseeded into the corn. So you can see that there's an interaction going on there between the growing of the 2 crops, and it's one of those things actually the researchers still really don't have a great handle on why it's happening, but they can, from their production figures, they're actually getting significant yield responses in that system. One of the other areas where I think the researchers are probably struggling to keep up with what the farmers are doing in practice. This is a guy, Jamie Scott, in Indiana. He's been no-tilling for probably 25 years, and now he's been doing cover crops for probably 10 or 11 years. And there's a photo there of 2 antlers. The antler on the left is typical size of the antlers that the deer would have prior to them commencing cover crops, and the wild deer that were just grazing the paddocks. But they've noticed over time that since the introduction of the cover crops, that the antler deer size has got bigger. And so the only thing they can put that down to is the fact that the cover crops is cycling nutrients back into the crops they're growing, and that nutrient availability is being made to the grazing animals, so it's resulting in better growth. And one of the interesting points that Jamie made to me while I was there was that having gone through the transition from no-till into cover cropping, he said if he had to choose between no-till and the cover crops, he would actually choose his cover crops. He's actually seen that as a bigger driver of crop health, soil health than he has from the no-till system. And on to some of the applicators that we looked at for nitrogen. This is one that we found in Germany with a friend Ulrich Tink and his family. And I suppose nitrogen, for most cropping people, it's probably one of the biggest bills that we face each year. And we go through the perennial question each year of, what do we apply, how much do we apply, and when do we apply it? And this system is based on the Coulthard system. And it's essentially looking at applying high concentrations of ammonium-based nitrogenous fertilisers, injecting them into the soil, and this is one method they use through a spike injector. And then it's applied once a year, and there's no volatilisation loss like we do get with urea, and there's no leaching loss through it. So this is traditionally applied in the early spring as the crop's coming out of their winter dormancy. In terms of nitrogen uptake efficiency, like from our point of view, I work on an uptake efficiency of about 50% in our nitrogen budgets that we do for our cropping system. Ulrich works on a minimum of 90 to 95% efficiency of uptake for their nitrogen. So, and you can see there, this is a trial he's done, which he put down in autumn, the year that canola was sown. So there's two rates there of 100 versus 300 kilograms per hectare of actual nitrogen. And you can imagine what our canola crops would look like if we'd put that on in the autumn. And this photo is actually taken when we were there in March in the spring. And the interesting thing from that is that there's no difference in the crop growth, and even behind that trial there's an application rate of 60 kilograms a hectare. So there's virtually no difference in the growth of those three rates, and that just shows how under that Coulthard system the plant's effectively self-regulating its nitrogen uptake as it needs it. So where to from here? So I've seen a lot, I've probably learned a lot, and we were probably halfway down the track of trying to work out how we'd change our rotation in our cropping system at home, and I guess the scholarship's given me the confidence to go forward. We've decided that we're going to change our winter dominant cropping system. We're going to start introducing summer crops and cover crops. We've started this year. We've got some safflower already in the ground, and we've got some grain sorghum going in for the first time next month, which will be the first, I think, for our area to grow grain sorghum. Like, once again, people say we can't do it, but it's only 40 hectares, so we won't know until we try. I've actually happened to find, I think, the only 3 existing spike injector wheels in Australia to resellers up at Moree. So I've had them revamped, or we've revamped them, and Russell Ford from Rice Research Australia, he's been kind enough, he's going to lend me an old toolbar he's got, and we're going to set up a demo unit this year. So we're going to do some trials at home on our safflower and sorghum, and then into our winter cropping systems next year. And I think Russell's going to plan to take it and do some work with the rice this year. But from that system we can also see it's probably got application for other industries like intensive dairy irrigation, where they can apply the nitrogen once a year rather than having to do urea applications multiple times a year. So, in the words of my father, no matter what you do, something's always going to go wrong. But really, at the end of the day, what's it going to matter in 100 years' time? So I guess that's the philosophy I've sort of grown up with. So it's probably a result of why I've ended up undertaking a Nuffield Scholarship. And to any of those budding Nuffield applicants, I don't know if there's any in the crowd today, but I'm going to tell you what Nuffield doesn't tell you. So if for some reason in the year that you decide to apply for Nuffield Scholarship, just consider if you're thinking about getting married, you're going to continue undertaking an off-farm job, and you're going to just begin to pull your house apart at the same time and do a renovation. Just have a think about which one you're going to do first. And finally, no matter what you do, whenever you come home from your Nuffield travels, I guarantee your farm's never going to look like it did when you left. So thank you.